A History of Southern Missouri and Northern Arkansas by William Monks, published in 1907. The KUKLUX, Part 5, Number 57. The judge and the sheriff and those who came with them left the room. I remained in the room until the usual bedtime. I heard them cursing outside and declare that they would take me out before daylight. I thought of my horse that was in the stable a few yards away. I remarked to Mr. Harris that I was going to the stable to look at my horse. He begged me not to go out, that I would be shot down. I said to him that it was a game that two or more could work at. On reaching the stable, I heard the men quarreling on the public square. A man by the name of Jones, who had been a Confederate and then was prosecuting attorney of the county, and another citizen, who appeared to be leading the mob, were having an altercation. Jones remarked to the other man that he had never met Colonel Monks until today, and that he appeared to be a perfect gentleman, that the war was over, and that he had the same right to come here and transact business as any other man. To which the other declared with an oath that a man who had fought them through the war shouldn't come there, and they intended to take him out and shoot him before daylight, and further charged that Jones was not a good Confederate. Jones then gave him the lie. The two appeared to be about to come together, but others interfered to keep them separated. I returned to the hotel and said to Mr. Harris that the seat of war had moved up onto the square. Mr. Maxey informed me that just outside of the door of the hotel he met the mob, and they declared that they intended to take Monks out and shoot him before daylight. He replied to them that they might do it, but they had better take their stretchers along, for some other persons would have to bring some of them out. That he had just been in the house, and in a moment he was confronted by Colonel Monks with a revolver presented at his left breast, and the very devil was in his eye, and if they entered the room he would shoot as long as he could move a finger. When bedtime came, I was placed in an upper room and locked the door, expecting that if they located my room they would shoot through the windows. I could still hear them cursing and threatening to take me out until late in the night. The next morning everything was quiet. I went to the stable and took my horse down to the spring to water. A number of men were standing at the side of the street, and one said, "Where do you suppose the captain and his men are?" I remarked to them that they were just like a pack of wolves. They were in the brush this morning, waiting for night to again renew their howling. There was one, Captain Wagoner, who resided in town, who remarked to me the next morning that he never was as proud of anything in his life, that if they could have scared me and I had attempted to leave town in the night, they intended to murder me. After circuit court convened, I went into court, and at noon of that day the court adjourned, and I, with a number of others, went to Thomasville, put up at the hotel, had my horse fed, and took supper. While on the road, the man that led the mob passed me on his way to Thomasville, where he resided. The defendants and their attorneys failed to produce a single witness to testify in the case. I returned home to West Plains. I was notified to meet them at other places in the country to take depositions in said cause. The political feeling was strong then between the parties, and they sent the suits to a county over 100 miles distant from where the suits were instituted. This county at that time was completely controlled by the Democratic Party. When the suits came up to be tried, over half of the jury had been late rebels, yet they failed to introduce a single witness to support their charges, and I recovered a verdict in each case. Judge Fian, who tried the case, said that he was never so surprised in his life, that he opened up the floodgates and let them bring in all their evidence from the beginning of the war up to the time of the trial. Judge Fian had been a colonel on the Federal side in the Civil War. On the account of failure to get any proof, the juries were compelled to give a verdict in both cases for Colonel Monks, although it was against the will and feeling of them. It cost the defendants between $500 and $700. After the trials, all parties returned to Howell County. The defendants, after they had procured a change of venue to Laclede County, boasted openly before trials that they were going to beat both cases, that they had got them into a Democratic county. The defendants, being beaten at all points, returned, but not being satisfied, and being backed by the late bushwhackers and KUKLUX, the most desperate sort of men that ever lived. At the next term of the Howell County Circuit Court, they procured the appointment of a special prosecution attorney, who had been a late rebel, and selected a jury of men composed of liberal Republicans and so-called Democrats, with the express purpose of indicting the writer for killing one of the most desperate bushwhackers and rebel desperados that ever was in South Missouri. The men who composed the jury knew well that he was killed in an open hand-to-hand fight during the Civil War. The writer soon found out that they were trying to get a bill of indictment against the writer, so the writer watched the proceedings of the grand jury. On Saturday, the grand jury came into court and turned in their indictments and reported to the court that they had no more business. The court discharged them. At the same moment, the writer asked the court if there was any bill of indictment preferred against him. He ran over the indictments and informed the writer that there was an indictment against him for murder in the first degree. The judge said that he was sorry that I had called it out, for he wanted to go home until Monday. I told him, just adjourn the court and go home. The sheriff is here. I remarked to the jury that they needn't have put the county to any cost hunting witnesses. If they had come to me, I could have told them that I killed them, and the only thing that I was sorry for was that I hadn't killed a lot more of the bushwhackers. I would love to ask this jury if they had indicted any of the bushwhackers and rebels who have hung and murdered Union men all over Howell County, irrespective of age. But most of those men were killed at their homes or taken from their homes and afterwards killed. A part of the men who did these things are still living in Howell County, and that jury knows it. The sheriff and the judge stepped out of the courthouse and in a few minutes returned, and the judge remarked, "I will turn you over to the sheriff." He then ordered the sheriff to adjourn the court until the next Monday. The sheriff remarked to the writer, "You can go where you please and report to the court at 10 o'clock next Monday." The writer remarked in the presence of the judge and sheriff, "I did not know that a man indicted for murder in the first degree could be paroled." The sheriff adjourned the court, and he and the judge left the courthouse together. When I met a number of my friends, as there was a political meeting going on that day, and informed them that I had been indicted and paroled until next Monday, I couldn't make some of them believe it. I appeared at 10 o'clock the next Monday morning, and before court was convened, Edward Say, an attorney at law, one among the ablest lawyers at the bar, a strong rebel sympathizer, came to the writer and said, "It is a shame that you have been indicted. It has been done for political purpose, and I want your consent to file a motion to quash the indictment." I remarked to him that I would rather have it tried before a jury of my country, so that I could show the intention and aims of those who caused said indictments to be procured. He still pled with me to let him file a motion to quash it, that it would not cost me 1 cent. I at last told him to use his own pleasure in regard to it, so he filed a motion to quash it and submitted the motion to the court without any argument, and the court sustained the motion and quashed the indictment. So ended that charge of murder against the writer. They saw they were beaten again, and their schemes were again exposed to the whole people, and they fell back sullen and became desperate. In a short time, the writer was informed that they were threatening to assassinate him and to be continually on the watch. I put men on their trails. Several attempts were made to decoy the writer into their nest, but they failed. They then employed one Dr. Belden, who made an attempt to shoot the author in his own dooryard. But the writer saw him in time to prevent his shooting, and he left the county at once. Shortly after, the author was again warned to be on the watch, that they were still making threats. There was a man by the name of W.H. McCowan who had been a Confederate colonel living in West Plains. He was known to be a very dangerous man when drinking and was an uncompromising rebel. The writer then resided in a house south of the town spring, known as the West Plains House, and the street ran within a few feet of the gate, which opened into a hall between the house and kitchen. There was a saloon about 40 yards west of the house on the same street, run by a man by the name of Jackson, another uncompromising rebel. This saloon appeared to be headquarters for these would-be assassins. I had just brought my horse from the stable and tied him by the gate with the intention of going to my farm. Mrs. Lassiter, who still resides in West Plains, had just come over to my house and was there at the time of the shooting. Mrs. McCowan, the wife of Colonel McCowan, came to my house that morning, came in the back way, and appeared to be very much excited, and informed me that certain men were going to assassinate me that morning, that to her knowledge they had been plotting for 3 days. They had been using every inducement, making her husband drunk and trying to work him into it. She had shut him up and locked the doors to keep them away from her husband, but they would raise the windows and come in. She had done all she could to keep her husband out of it, and she thought it was her duty to come and let me know that they had agreed to shoot me that morning. I thanked her for the information and said to her that I would ever be grateful to her. I further said to her that I did not want to hurt the colonel or any other person, but they must not come to my house on that kind of business if they didn't want to get hurt. In a few moments she returned home, going around the back way. I at once sent to S.P. Woodworth, a merchant who resided in West Plains and a strong Union man, for his double-barreled shotgun. I had 2 good Navy pistols. He sent me his gun and said it was well loaded with buckshot and was sure to fire. I advised the women, if they came, to keep cool and go into the back room so they would be out of danger. I raised the 2 front windows of the sitting room about 2 or 3 inches, so I could shoot under them, keeping a close watch on the saloon. In about 30 minutes after Mrs. McCowan left, I saw 2 of the men leave the saloon and come in the direction of my house. They came to the gate, opened it, and stepped onto the porch. My wife went to the door and begged them to leave. One of the men said that he wanted to see the colonel. He was armed with 2 first-class pistols, one of the pistols belonging to Colonel McCowan. I cocked both barrels of my shotgun and stepped out on the porch with my gun presented, and ordered him to turn around and leave my premises in 1 minute. Just at that moment, my youngest daughter, now the wife of Mr. Green, sprang forward and caught my gun. I said to her, "For God's sake, keep away from me." But she stood by my side. During this time, he had passed outside of the gate and had gotten behind a tree, had his pistol cocked and presented at me, and in a moment I had him covered with my shotgun. He would attempt to get sight on me and would dodge his head back behind the tree. Not knowing where the other man was, I watched his head, and when he attempted to take sight, I fired at his head. At the crack of the gun, he fell. Then 6 or 7 men commenced jumping out at the door of the saloon. The first thing I thought of was, they will pretend to arrest me and give the mob a chance to shoot me after I'm disarmed. I sprang on my horse and rode east, and in a few moments 5 or 6 men came to my door and asked my wife who shot first. She ordered them to leave the house. They soon found that one of the would-be assassins was shot. On an examination, it was found that one of the shot had struck him in the right side of the forehead. The right side of the brim of his hat was torn into fragments, and the tree had caught a part of the load. The tree is still standing in the yard. Immediately afterward, I sent them word that they had again opened the ball, and I was ready to fight it out. I never saw men begin to plead for peace as hard in my life. The sheriff and others would come to me and say, "Colonel, why didn't you shoot some of those fellows long ago? This is just what they needed." I asked them why they hadn't arrested some of the assassins long ago.